Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real-time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am thrilled for our guest today. He's an entrepreneur, an explorer, an endurance athlete. In 2013, he became the first openly LGBT individual to conquer the 7 summits. Wow. He's completed ultra marathons, Ironman triathlons, and a wide range of races, including the USA Network Race to Survive Alaska. His product has become the first of its kind to be served on major U.S. airlines and has been featured in top publications like the New York Times and Bon Appetit. Please welcome the founder of Explorer Cold Brew and the Rainbow Summit Project, Cason Crane. Welcome, Cason.
Thanks, Greg. I'm so happy to be here.
It's awesome to have you on the show, and I can't wait to dig into your background. But before we jump into that, we love talking about the endurance mindset. So I'm curious, how has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
Oh, yes. Unexpectedly. I think the endurance mindset has impacted me unexpectedly, sort of most in social settings, particularly, I grew up with an endurance mindset imbued in me in my life, me and my siblings from my parents basically from birth. And so the unexpected effect of that strong endurance mindset has been that it can create social dynamics where people don't, rather than feeling like people can do something that I believe they can do, they actually think the opposite. Like it's this weird thing where I want people to do things with me, but because of this endurance mindset I have, they actually think it's less accessible to them rather than more. And so as somebody who loves like bringing people along for the ride and getting people to push themselves outside of their comfort zone, it can be really frustrating because I'm like, no. Like, forget that I climbed Everest. Forget that you can do that too. And so it's this weird side effect of of having such an extreme endurance mindset that other people feel like that's actually not attainable for them, when I would say it is.
You're the first guest to bring up that point, and you're spot on, because there's so many conversations that we have about crossing an Ironman finish line or doing an ultra or summiting one of these massive mountains. And people not automatically, but many times they come back and say, oh, I can never do that.
Yes.
And it's so frustrating, right? It's like,
Yes.
I was in that position at one point in my life that I could never cross an Ironman finish line. And you were at a position in your life that you said, I could never summit Everest. So let's unpack that a little bit more. Like, tell me a little bit more about your journey between the I could never and then when you got to whatever destination you had set that goal for.
Well, Greg, you actually mentioned the I could never summit Everest comment, and I think you were using that as sort of an illustrative example, but I had a real I could never summit Everest moment, actually. That was the genesis in some ways of the high altitude mountaineering I ended up doing, because I was climbing with my mother just for fun. We were just climbing, nothing. Well, it was special in the sense that it was beautiful, but it wasn't some big Himalayan peak. We were just out there mountaineering, and we had an incredible guide and coach with us, Lydia Brady. She was the first woman to summit Everest without oxygen. Incredible, underappreciated climbing legend, in my opinion. And she asked me, she was like, so Cason, remind me, when are you climbing Everest again? And I was like, I can't climb Everest. What are you talking about? And there had been some misunderstanding or miscommunication where she thought it wasn't like a joke, or it wasn't like some sort of inspirational, like, when are you climbing Everest? It was a serious, like, remind me, like, are you climbing it this year or next year? Like, when are you slated to? And I was like, I definitely can't do that. And her response was, what are you talking about? Yes, you can do Everest. Like, you're perfectly capable of doing that. And that one conversation, I mean, I'll never forget it, because it then unlocked for me this idea of what might be possible. And the combination of that, specifically with Everest, that I think many of us, many of the folks like listening to this podcast, and I don't want to speak for you, but you know, for a lot of people, you grow up sort of dreaming of climbing to the summit of Mount Everest. It's one of the, it's like going into space. Like, I don't know. It's, to me, it was always one of those dreams, and a dream is by definition only questionably attainable. If it's certainly attainable, it's not a dream, So this dream of climbing Everest, I never actually thought was possible. But at the same time, my parents had imbued this endurance mindset from a young age, pre-Everest, there was always this challenge-oriented, goal-oriented mindset. And so the combination of those two things meant that a year later, I was on the summit of Mount Everest.
That's awesome. And it's funny that you used the going into space, because I think you were probably the closest point to being in space at the top of Mount Everest. You mentioned something in telling that story about Linda. Did she say climbing Everest again, as if she was thinking that you had climbed it once and you were going to do it again? Or was it a, when
No.
are you climbing Everest?
Yeah, it was, again, was like, remind me, when are you climbing
Oh,
Everest?
got
And
it.
it wasn't and again, I mean, to be fair, I was only 18 years old at the time. So, yes, I was, yeah, I don't think she did not think I had already climbed it. It was like, remind me. Yeah. Like, when are you climbing Everest again? Like, but it was casual. I include the again, because that's literally how she said it. How Lydia said it. And, it's this, like, it was just so casual. The casualness actually was part of what was so startling and inspiring, because it wasn't this like, I'm going to sit you down and I'm going to convince you that this is within your reach. It was like, yeah, what are you talking about? Of course you can do it.
It was already written, right?
Yeah.
Because when you said it the way you said it, it made me think of a question around climbing, and I'm not a climber. Um, so when you summit one of these 7 summits, is there ever a point that you want to go back and do it again? Or do you start thinking about a different summit or a different climb? Is it like, I want to do Everest 5 times in my life, or do I want to do the 7 something? Like when I get to the end of a finish line of an Ironman race, I'm sort of looking forward to the next Ironman race. Granted, they're different terrain.
Right at the finish line? Oh,
Pretty
Greg, you're
close.
crazy.
I consider the finish line of an Ironman race the starting line of the next race.
Oh
Truly.
gosh. I mean, it takes
Yeah.
me like a couple hours to like recharge the excitement, but um I think everyone's different. Um just like some folks would say, give them a week or a month post Ironman, and then they'll be back on the horse or back on the bandwagon. With climbing, I think it's, from my experience, it's a bit of both. I think there's this almost drug like allure of getting to the summit and then getting back down safely. Another piece of wisdom that Lydia imparted was the summit is only halfway, and it's not a successful summit unless you get back down off the mountain in one piece and alive. Which I think is really important for obvious reasons, but people they get summit fever and they forget that. On Everest, for example, I mean, Everest is just so iconic. And of course, there's plenty more technical peaks. There's more remote peaks. There's probably more beautiful peaks, but there is still something that's so special and cool about Mount Everest. I would love to go back there. Other mountains, it was more, I'm really excited to be done with this crazy expedition, and I have no interest in going back. Like Karsten's Pyramid in Western Papua, that one, no way. I also did that one with my mother, and my mother and I, we were talking about it. We're like, this was the most miserable experience of our lives. And the only way I would ever consider coming back and climbing this crazy peak in the middle of nowhere jungle in Western Papua, literally 7 days trek through deep, thick jungle each way, 7 days in, 1 day climb, 7 days out. There's no shortcuts. There's nothing easy about that. Oh, and by the way, the jungles are inhabited by the tribal groups of Papua that are both trying to get their independence from Indonesia, so they'll occasionally hold clan groups hostage, and some of them are the few remaining cannibal tribes left on the
Hmm.
planet. So it's a crazy experience, and we were like, the only way we would come back and do this again is if there were like a film crew following, so that they could see how insane this is. Um, so I've not been back.
Wow, you got my palms sweating just thinking about that. Um, you mentioned your mother a handful of times. It sounds like climbing was introduced to you really early in your life.
It, I think, I instead of, I mean, yes and no. I would say that being an outdoorsy person, an adventure seeker, that was introduced very early. My parents both worked in finance, and we worked and they worked and lived. We all lived and they worked in Hong Kong in the 90s. And it, it started with just travel, because especially in the 90s, travel was it still is very accessible in Asia, um, in a way that, it's much more expensive and further to get to from the US. But if you're living in Hong Kong, uh, there's this whole continent of incredible sites, culture, history, races, whatever it is, within a very accessible, within accessible reach. And so we grew up traveling all the time. We grew up sort of going way off the beaten track. And then when my mother retired from her career in finance and started spending her free time going on more and more physical adventures, naturally, she brought her built-in teammates along, which was me and my four siblings, so her five children, and my father. Sometimes he was like, yeah, he was like 50-50. And he was working, to be in his defense, he was working. But what I say outdoorsy because, when I was 13, our family vacation was riding across Mongolia for a month on horseback. So that's not a race, that's not an Ironman, that's not a Himalayan peak, but it's still a crazy adventure. So it was a much wider swath of undertakings. And she was always looking to find a new adventure to go on. It then, as time went on, I mean, she got more and more experienced and successful in ultra marathoning. So she did ultras all over the world. She ended up doing a marathon. Actually, she and I did marathons together on all seven continents, which is very cool. And she did 4 of the 7 summits. I mean, she really, yeah, she went on a ton of adventures.
Wow, spectacular. And I know I love the way you use the word adventuring, because for me, it creates memories, right? Um, there's a classic book, and I'm trying to think of the name of it, Die with Zero, and it talks about how investing your money and your time into adventures creates memories, and then those memories pay you dividends for the rest of your life. Like, I could see you
So
light up
true.
talking about those adventures. Um, any lessons learned on one or many of those adventures that you've applied in other aspects of your life?
So many. My mother, as you I think know, passed away last year. And she fought a courageous 6-year battle with lung cancer.
Mm,
And when she was diagnosed at age 53 as a lifetime non-smoker, obviously super athlete, non-smoker, non-drinker, like the healthiest 98-pound fit woman imaginable. Um, I mean, it was quite a shock, the diagnosis, and it was, again, very late stage. It had already metastasized to her brain and other places, and it's a miracle that she lived 6 years. The initial prognosis was 3 to 6 months. So I mentioned that in the context of your question about lessons, because despite a lifetime of going on adventures with her, again, her built-in team, her 5 children, when she was diagnosed, she decided to go on what seemed to be, at the time, like one last adventure with each of her children, in part to try to impart lessons, like these critical life lessons that she felt like hadn't come across completely in the prior adventures. Now, we ended up going on multiple because, again, she lived longer than anyone could imagine. She ended up doing 6 Ironmans post-diagnosis.
Wow.
Post-diagnosis. She did a marathon in all 50 states and all 7 continents. She continued pushing herself in a way that shocked and I think terrified her doctors. But at a certain point, they just said, at the beginning, they were like, Isabella, I don't know if this is a good idea. Like, your body is fighting off this disease. Are you sure you want to put it in the stress of, being an Ironman or doing this or that? And she insisted, and she was correct, I think. So eventually they were like, you know what? Whatever you're doing, it's working. Keep doing it. But the lessons are just too many to count. I think one of the biggest ones for me is that she always said, all you can control, you can't control other people's actions. All you can control is your reaction, whether that's a reaction to something someone's done or to a life circumstance, whether that's a setback in a race, getting cramps in an Ironman or having stomach issues in Ironman, which I think we've all been there. Any Ironman has, any Ironman athlete knows the feeling of messing up the nutrition and having stomach issues and not fun. Or whether it's social, whether it's feeling like, you're getting spurned by a friend or rejected by someone, or all you can control is how you react. And she always tried to she always used the physical adventures we went on as more bite-sized opportunities to apply that philosophy of accepting and embracing. In other words, accepting and embracing the suck, because that is that is life in a nutshell. Life, there's many beautiful parts of life, whether it's the finish line or whether it's the you're on the bike in an Ironman and you're looking at the incredible landscape around you, or you're doing a race with somebody and you see them pass by, and there's so many positive moments, not just the finish line, though the finish line's amazing. But there's also lots of challenging and negative ones. And it's fully accepting that and embracing that mindset of just accepting what will be, and then, controlling and taking ownership over your own reactions as a way to ultimately be the most fulfilled, happy, and successful version of yourself.
I love it. I love the embracing the suck. I'm a huge believer in we choose which emotions we want to feel, like where your awareness is. I'm in sadness right now, or I'm in happiness, and you can manipulate where you are by having memories and with some meditation and other things. Wow, what a powerful human being.
Well, are you a mindfulness practitioner?
I'm a dabbler in it. I wish I was more of a practitioner, but I'm always reading mindset books, listening to podcasts, doing things, and just trying to grab on to oh, where's my awareness right now?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm thinking about work, or I'm thinking about my kids, or I'm thinking about, and what's the feeling I'm having and why? So I'm always trying to unpack sort of mindfulness. Why do you ask?
Well, because I'm always curious how other endurance athletes, so much of it is the mental side. From the very first question about the endurance mindset, that's one dimension, sort of like the tip of the iceberg. There's really all these other components. And I think your response of sort of being thoughtful and aware of the full breadth of emotions is really interesting, because I think if you were to talk to an athlete in a different sport, well, maybe they would say that, or maybe they wouldn't be as in touch with, as you said, sadness or anxiety, these, the other dimensions that I think as endurance athletes and as just generally sort of motivated, ambitious people, putting athletics aside, you need to be thinking about the full self in order to
Mm.
like the full breadth of your emotions and your emotional being. So I was just curious.
Yeah, 100%, because as you know, right, the highs are highs and the lows are lows, and you're gonna go through all of them multiple times trying to achieve a finish line, trying to achieve a summit, trying to have a career. And I think the more that we can experience the highs and the lows, the more our sort of mindset muscle builds.
Yes.
So I'm gonna switch topics on you, talk about coffee. Love to know about how this business came around, what inspired you. Clearly, I think your world travel has a big influence on coffee because as it's one of those products that you find everywhere, but it tastes a little
Everywhere.
bit different everywhere.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite things in the world, next to wine, but that's okay. Um, but I'd love to know how you started your business. Where did this entrepreneurial bug come from? Give us some of your story.
So before starting my coffee business, Explorer Cold Brew, I followed a relatively like traditional career trajectory, going to college and then working as a management consultant in New York. And when COVID hit, uh, I, I, I mean, obviously we were all stuck in our apartments or our houses, wherever you live. We couldn't leave. I mean, really, it's crazy to think about now, but people, you'd get shamed for even like going outside to go for a run. Like we were stuck in those early, March, April, May of 2020. And I got a little stir crazy for reasons that I think won't be a surprise to anyone who's listened to the last 25 minutes. Um, and my therapist said, well, Cason, you should pick up a hobby. Obviously, like a hobby that's not travel or endurance sports or going out to eat or drink or dance with friends, because none of those things are possible right now. But like learn an instrument or like learn a language. Uh, I am not good at most things that require talent. I would put languages in that bucket too. I'm terrible at languages. I have no musical. I think I'm completely tone deaf. I think like I have no pitch. I can't hear, like I'm really bad at anything musical. I love listening, but I cannot do an instrument. I can't sing, nothing like that. And so the only thing I could really come up with to fill my time and channel my energy into was brainstorming business ideas. It's like,
Okay.
that's kind of cool and creative. Like it requires a well-rounded skill set of thinking through the business side, the unit economics and stuff, but also thinking on the creative side around what a brand could be. What's, how does it look and feel? And I was like, oh, this is actually it's a fun project. Like I can order things from the grocery store to sort of get a read on the competitive landscape. I was gravitating towards food and beverage because both as an individual, as an athlete, I think, I think a lot about what I put into my body. And so, yeah, so I started brainstorming product business ideas. And throughout that journey in early 2020 or mid 2020, I was fueled by cold brew. Cold brew
Mm.
was not the business idea. Cold brew was the fuel that was keeping me up all day with this hobby and all night. And I say all night because that's very important. I developed terrible insomnia because I was having cold brew. I mean, stuck in my Brooklyn apartment, I was having cold brew in the morning, at lunch, and in the afternoon, and basically could not go to sleep. So my husband, my then boyfriend, now husband, begged me to switch to decaf. And so I went and I looked for decaf cold brew because, like any good millennial, I only drink cold brew. Or I have a strong preference. I do drink other coffee. I've got an espresso machine behind me, but I generally only drink cold brew, my cold brew in particular. Um, and there was no decaf cold brew, and this shocked me. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. A quick Google search revealed that at least 10% of coffee cups consumed are decaf. At least 10%. The number is now estimated to be about 20%. And the cold brew was a relatively recent phenomenon. I mean, Starbucks only finished rolling out cold brew in its stores in 2016. So, 2020 is still pretty recent. And I was like, okay, this is it. I need this product for myself. And I do believe from this from this preliminary research I've done, there is definitely a market for this. And so I moved into sort of urgent action mode, bringing a concept product to market, which I did in about 3 months, and got a few thousand people to try the product, to buy the product and to try it, and got really positive feedback. And it wasn't just a decaf. We started and still have 4 different caffeine levels, ranging from 99.9% caffeine free to 300 milligrams per serving, which, for those not used to thinking about caffeine, 300 milligrams of caffeine is roughly 4 espresso shots. So it's a lot, as a lot of caffeine, and 2 in between. So I developed the product, got great feedback, and then I decided to leave Bain and pursue Explorer Cold Brew full time. And that was 4 years ago. Oh my gosh, that was 4 years ago, almost to the day. October 23rd, 4 years ago. So we're a couple days past that.
Yeah, it was fate to be on the show.
Gosh, I forgot to celebrate our birthday.
Well, now you can plan for the 5th year. So curious, like, were you in your kitchen with coffee beans and grinding and pressing, and like, walk me through the sort of product development testing side of that?
So it was, there was sort of dual tracks. On one hand, I was doing some myself in my house, like getting decaf and half calf coffee beans, grinding them, cold brewing at home. But I think in doing that, I'd been buying concentrate before from the store. Self brewing cold brew is an annoying process. Some people do it and they love it, and that is part of their like routine, and I love that for them. But it's kind of annoying. You've got to steep the beans overnight. It can be messy and inconsistent. And there's a reason that other formats of cold brew are more popular than brewing it yourself. Sometimes, for example, you only have enough for 1 cup and you're like, oh, shoot, I'm out. Now I have to wait till tomorrow before I can have more. That's not good. Or you have to buy some from the grocery store, get a concentrate or a ready to drink can. So that was one track. I was able to get a sense of different flavor profiles. I had never viewed myself as a coffee connoisseur, which is why I had a parallel track. I reached out to some of the people I most respected in the coffee world on Instagram. I just DM'd them out of the blue saying, hi, I'm working on this new project. Do you have any interest in working with me on developing this new product for the market here in the US? Obviously, I compensate them for their time and their opinions and their taste buds, much more refined than my own. And so I was simultaneously working with a long time cold brewing expert here in the US and 3 around the world. And the 5 of us were taste testing dozens of different beans, roasts, like origins, roasts, concentration levels. And I was shipping it literally all over the world: Lebanon, Indonesia, South Africa, Texas, like all over the world. And we would all fill out there'd be blind tastings. We'll fill out these online surveys that I created. And then by the end of the 3 months, I felt really good about the product we had centered on, that we crafted together. So there was a bit of both at home, and then also, with an actual like professional scale cold brewing facility partner. And I needed to do that in parallel because of the tight timeline.
Sure. So going back to my first question about things unexpected, what's one thing that's been unexpected in your entrepreneurial journey?
I think people have, it's not uncommon for entrepreneurs to talk about how hard it is to be an entrepreneur. I think I was ready for the highs and lows that the business highs and lows, oh my gosh, we just unexpectedly lost our biggest customer that is 25% of our annual revenue. Oh my God. Like this could put the business under. That really happened. I had to wake up, deal with that. I mean, deal with that. And I say deal with that meaning like get myself out of bed. Like
Mm.
I had to accept that. And, to follow my mother's advice, realize that the only thing I could control is my reaction, which, anyway, we found a way to keep the customer in a different capacity and it was still ongoing. But the point is, there was a moment when it looked really dark and there've also been tremendous highs. We're launching in Whole Foods Market nationwide at the end of the year. I'm very excited for that. And that was a huge, huge win. Brands do not get nationwide rollouts at Whole Foods Market. You typically get one, maybe two regions to start in. You don't get it's such an incredible special vote of confidence in our product and our brand from the team at Whole Foods Market. So I'm really excited for that. Huge high. But what I wasn't anticipating in terms of the challenges was how lonely it is and how isolating. And part of that is because as an operator in CPG in 2024, I have by necessity an extremely lean team. I have no full-time employees. It's just me full-time. And I have an incredible team of part-time fractional folks who are all doing different business critical components, but they're not in, I don't ever see them we don't work together in person. And even if we did, I can't talk with them about all the, like, I can't be honest with them about my emotions with the business. When I have those lows, I would be a bad leader if I then went to my team and burdened them with that, tried to take the burden off of my shoulders and put it on their burden. I think that's bad leadership. And so the consequence of that is that it is extremely isolating at times for me. And that has been a real unexpected challenge.
And that challenge is real. My prior business, I had that same issue. I had a team of 10 employees. And if a client called and was unhappy and it's going to change the trajectory of the business, and we had already been through a bankruptcy process, and I found like a peer-to-peer group here locally that I was able to lean into that helped me kind of get through a lot of those darker times. So my final question on that is, do you miss management consulting?
I had an amazing 3.5 years at Bain, and I'm so glad that I worked there. I think despite the challenges I mentioned, running Explorer Cold Brew and being a small business owner, I don't think I could give this up. I love the magic of having it be my baby, and as fulfilling as consulting was in other ways, it for me doesn't compare in terms of the career and like the professional and personal fulfillment of having something sort of my own creation that is having a really positive impact on people's lives, especially our decaf, which, just to go all the way back to the origin story 4 years ago, when I was like, surely I'm not alone. Lo and behold, 4 years later, decaf is our top selling caffeine level by a long shot. I get inbound emails all the time from customers saying, oh my God, thank you so much for making a decaf cold brew. I've been looking for this. I've been waiting for this. I'm so happy that you created this product, and that that fulfillment is it's incredible. There's nothing like it. It's like finishing an Ironman or summiting Everest. It's once you've felt it. For me, once I felt it, I don't think I can go back and do anything else.
That's awesome. Um, so an audience member wants to have this in their home tomorrow. Where's the best place for them to go?
Right now, the best place to find Explorer Cold Brew is on our website, explorercoldbrew.com, or on Amazon. But then in 2025, we will be in an ever increasing number of grocery stores, including Whole Foods. So you can check our website and our store locator map on explorercoldbrew.com and buy it in store. But for now, safest bet is to get it on Amazon or our website.
Awesome. And we'll include those links in the show notes for sure. Cason, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Add me on Instagram at Cason Crane on Instagram. Send me a message. I respond to everyone.
Fantastic. It's been awesome having you on the show. I loved where we started this conversation about social sort of awkwardness about endurance mindset and how others feel around us. And then we got into talking about the impact that your mom has had on your life and your siblings and your brothers and sisters' lives and your father. And, that just brought a lot of sort of vulnerability to me because I'm big into my family and my kids are at my races and my wife got me into Ironman. And so that conversation was, and then I love your entrepreneurial journey. I'm a hot coffee guy, but I might have to try it maybe. But anyway, that's for the next show.
Well, stay tuned. We might have some new products coming out later this year, so stay tuned. That might be more up your alley, expanding beyond cold brew. um, and also, I just want to say before we end, my mother is so inspiring to me. My father is as well, but also my four younger siblings are so freaking cool. I feel so lucky to have them because they inspire me and push me every day. I raced across Alaska with my sister Bella, Badass Bella, on a TV show on Peacock. My brother Oliver rode solo across the Atlantic Ocean. My brother David cycled across Africa from north to south. I mean, so I feel very lucky, and I think it's very special to have a family that can get involved in their own way and in supporting the other family members in whatever adventures folks are interested in.
That's amazing. I just visualized this show sometime in the future with like six different blocks, and we're all having this podcast conversation recording, and I'm trying to wind each of you up and watching you guys, you know, poke and prod each other. So stay tuned for that. Audience members, if you got some value out of today, please like the show. Please subscribe. Let's share this message with our community. Thank you again, Cason, for being here. It's great to have you on the show today.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits.